The rise of monasticism occurred during a transformative period in European history, spanning from the 6th to the 12th centuries, known as the Early to High Middle Ages. This era emerged from the ashes of the once mighty Roman Empire, as Western Europe entered a period of profound change and reorganization. In the wake of Rome's collapse, Western Europe faced significant challenges. The sophisticated administrative systems of the empire had crumbled, leaving a patchwork of fragmented kingdoms in their place. These kingdoms, ruled by various Germanic peoples such as the Franks, Visigoths, and Lombards, struggled to maintain order and continuity with the classical past. The geographic heart of this monastic movement lay in Western Europe, particularly in what would become France, Italy, and England. These regions, once prosperous Roman provinces, now witnessed the emergence of a new social and religious order. The monasteries that dotted their landscapes served as beacons of stability in an uncertain world. The cultural landscape of this period was marked by the growing influence of Christianity. As Roman institutions declined, the Church emerged as the primary guardian of literacy, education, and administrative expertise. This transformation was particularly evident in the countryside, where monasteries became centers of learning and civilization amid largely rural communities. The political structure of the time was characterized by decentralization. Local lords held significant power, operating within a feudal system that bound people together through mutual obligations of service and protection. Above this local authority, the Church was gradually establishing itself as a unified, centralized power, providing a degree of cohesion to an otherwise fragmented society. During this period, the Church grew increasingly organized and influential, developing into what would become the medieval papacy. This emerging ecclesiastical authority provided a framework for religious life and gradually extended its influence over secular matters as well. Monasteries played a crucial role in this development, serving as local representatives of church authority and centers of spiritual and intellectual life. In these uncertain times, monasteries emerged as islands of stability and learning. They preserved ancient knowledge, developed new agricultural techniques, provided medical care, and offered spiritual guidance to surrounding communities. Their influence would prove fundamental in shaping the civilization that would emerge from this period of transformation. The monastery became more than just a religious institution. It was a cornerstone of medieval society, providing essential services and maintaining cultural continuity during a time of great change. This was the world in which monasticism would flourish and make its lasting mark on European civilization. If you found this historical journey fascinating, don't forget to show your support by liking this video and subscribing to Medieval Chronicles for more engaging content about medieval history. Among the towering figures of medieval monasticism, Saint Benedict of Nursia stands as the most influential architect of Western monastic life. Born around 480 AD to a noble Roman family, Benedict abandoned his studies in Rome, seeking spiritual solitude in the caves of Subiaco. His journey from hermit to spiritual leader would revolutionize monastic practice for centuries to come. Benedict's greatest contribution was his Rule, a masterful document that balanced spiritual devotion with practical wisdom. The Rule provided a complete blueprint for monastic life, emphasizing moderation, community, and the harmony between prayer and work. This revolutionary approach transformed scattered monastic communities into well-organized institutions that would endure for over a millennium. Working alongside Benedict were countless dedicated monks and nuns who brought his vision to life. The Benedictine monks, with their black habits and dedication to scholarship, became the standard-bearers of monastic life. Their sister communities of nuns, though often overlooked by history, played equally vital roles in education, healthcare, and spiritual leadership. Local clergy and bishops formed crucial bridges between monasteries and the broader Christian community. These religious leaders often came from noble families and brought with them connections that helped protect and sustain monastic institutions. They worked to integrate monasteries into the fabric of medieval religious life while maintaining their distinctive character. The success of monasticism owed much to the support of secular rulers. Charlemagne, the great Frankish king, saw monasteries as centers of learning and actively promoted their establishment throughout his realm. Other nobles followed suit, donating land and resources to establish new monasteries, seeing them as sources of spiritual merit and cultural preservation. Yet the path of monasticism was not without its challenges. Viking raiders posed a serious threat, particularly in the 9th and 10th centuries. These Norse warriors saw wealthy monasteries as prime targets, leading to the destruction of many communities and the loss of countless manuscripts and artifacts. Monasteries responded by building stronger defenses and sometimes relocating to more secure locations. Perhaps more challenging were the internal conflicts that arose within the monastic movement itself. Debates raged over the proper interpretation of Benedict's rule, leading to reforms and the emergence of new orders. The Cluniac reform movement, beginning in the 10th century, sought to restore stricter adherence to the rule while increasing the independence of monasteries from secular control. Theological disputes also created tension within monastic communities. Questions about liturgical practices, the nature of religious authority, and the proper balance between contemplation and active service led to passionate debates. These internal struggles, while sometimes divisive, often resulted in renewed spiritual vigor and institutional reform. Notable figures like Saint Bernard of Clairvaux emerged as powerful voices for reform and renewal. Bernard's Cistercian order represented a return to stricter interpretation of the rule, emphasizing manual labor and simplicity over the growing wealth and complexity of traditional Benedictine houses. His eloquent writings and powerful personality made him one of the most influential figures of the 12th century. The story of medieval monasticism is also one of remarkable women leaders. Hildegard of Bingen, for example, was not only an abbess but also a composer, writer, and respected advisor to popes and emperors. These women religious leaders often faced additional challenges in establishing their authority, but made lasting contributions to monastic life and medieval culture. Despite external threats and internal conflicts, the monastic movement continued to adapt and evolve. New orders emerged, each with its own interpretation of the religious life, from the contemplative Carthusians to the more actively engaged Augustinians. This diversity of expression within the monastic tradition helped ensure its survival and continued relevance. At the heart of medieval monasticism lay a profound mission of spiritual transformation and the preservation of knowledge, standing as beacons of order in an age often characterized by upheaval and uncertainty. This dual purpose shaped not only individual lives but the course of Western civilization itself. The spiritual transformation at the core of monastic life represented a radical departure from ordinary medieval existence. Monks and nuns sought to create heaven on earth through disciplined devotion and contemplative practice. Their daily lives revolved around the pursuit of spiritual perfection, guided by the belief that through regulated prayer, work, and study, one could draw closer to the divine. In these sacred spaces, spiritual discipline took many forms. The day was structured around the divine office, with prayers marking the hours from dawn to dusk. Silence was embraced as a tool for inner reflection, broken only by the chanting of psalms and necessary communication. Physical labor was viewed not as mere necessity, but as a form of prayer itself, following the motto Ora et labora, pray and work. Amidst the chaos of the early medieval period, monasteries emerged as bastions of stability and order. While kingdoms rose and fell, and armies marched across Europe, monastery walls sheltered a different kind of revolution, the preservation of knowledge. Within their scriptoria, monks meticulously copied not only religious texts, but also classical works of literature, philosophy, and science that might otherwise have been lost to time. This preservation of knowledge went far beyond mere copying. Monasteries developed sophisticated systems of organization and cataloging, creating some of the first libraries in medieval Europe. They became centers of learning where ancient texts were not only preserved but studied, commented upon, and integrated into medieval thought. The monks' patient work in translating texts from Greek and Arabic into Latin made ancient wisdom accessible to medieval scholars. The social impact of monasteries extended far beyond their walls. They served as centers of community building, providing essential services to the surrounding population. Monastery hospitals cared for the sick and injured, while their schools educated local children. Their agricultural innovations improved farming techniques throughout Europe, and their charitable works provided support for the poor and disadvantaged. In times of crisis, monasteries often stood as islands of stability. During Viking raids or local conflicts, they provided refuge for local populations. Their economic activities helped stabilize regions, introducing new agricultural techniques and maintaining trade networks. Monastery mills, breweries, and workshops became important centers of economic activity. Yet this mission of preservation and transformation faced constant challenges. The temptation of worldly wealth and power sometimes led monasteries astray from their spiritual purpose, prompting reform movements that sought to restore the original ideals of monastic life. The balance between contemplation and active engagement with the world remained a persistent source of tension. The intellectual preservation carried out by monasteries was not without its own conflicts. Decisions about which texts to copy, which philosophical traditions to embrace, and how to reconcile classical learning with Christian doctrine created ongoing debates within monastic communities. These discussions helped shape medieval intellectual life and the development of universities. Perhaps most remarkably, monasteries served as bridges between the ancient and medieval worlds. Through their preservation of classical texts and their development of new intellectual traditions, they helped ensure the continuity of Western cultural heritage. Their role in education and scholarship laid the groundwork for the Renaissance and the modern academic tradition. The social service aspect of monastic life represented a practical application of spiritual ideals. Monasteries developed sophisticated systems for caring for the sick, supporting the poor, and providing education. These services helped stabilize medieval society while demonstrating how spiritual ideals could be translated into practical action. Community building extended beyond mere charitable works. Monasteries often served as mediators in local disputes, provided advice to secular rulers, and maintained networks of communication across Europe. Their influence helped create a sense of common culture and purpose that transcended local political boundaries. As we reflect on this remarkable legacy, we see how monasteries succeeded in their dual mission of spiritual transformation and knowledge preservation, creating institutions that would profoundly influence Western civilization for centuries to come. Their example of combining contemplative life with practical service continues to inspire many today. The daily life within medieval monasteries followed a carefully structured routine that balanced spiritual devotion with practical necessities. From the first bell before dawn until the final prayers at night, every hour had its designated purpose, creating a rhythm that remained largely unchanged for centuries. The day began with the night office, or matins, when monks rose in the darkness to begin their prayers. As the first light appeared, they continued with lauds, followed by prime at sunrise. These early morning prayers set the tone for a day dedicated to both spiritual and practical pursuits. Throughout the day, the divine office continued with terce, sext, nun, vespers, and finally compline, marking the day's end. Between these prayer services, monks engaged in various forms of work and study. In the monastery's scriptorium, skilled copyists labored over manuscripts, carefully transcribing texts while others prepared parchment or mixed inks. The library served as a center of learning, where monks studied scripture, the church fathers, and classical texts. What might surprise many is the sophisticated social organization within monastery walls. A clear hierarchy existed, with the abbot or abbess at its head, holding both spiritual and administrative authority. Below them, the prior or prioress served as second in command, overseeing daily operations. Various other offices held specific responsibilities. The cellarer managed provisions, the infirmarian cared for the sick, and the novice master trained new members. The monastic community was divided between choir monks, who were typically literate and focused on prayer and intellectual work, and lay brothers, who handled more manual tasks. Novices, spending their year of preparation, occupied a distinct position as they learned the monastic way of life. This hierarchy, while strict, provided structure and stability to community life. At the heart of monastic life lay the three fundamental vows: poverty, chastity, and obedience. The vow of poverty required monks to renounce personal possessions, though the monastery itself could own property collectively. Chastity demanded complete sexual abstinence, allowing full devotion to spiritual matters. Obedience required submission to the abbot's authority and the monastery's rules, creating a disciplined community. The economic role of monasteries was far more extensive than many realize. Their agricultural activities often made them the most efficient farmers in medieval Europe. Monasteries introduced new farming techniques, managed extensive lands, and developed specialized production in areas like winemaking and cheesemaking. Their granaries helped stabilize local food supplies, and their mills served entire communities. Manuscript production represented another crucial economic activity. Beyond religious texts, monasteries copied and preserved classical works, medical treatises, and legal documents. This service generated income through commissions from wealthy patrons while preserving crucial knowledge for future generations. The daily schedule included periods of manual labor, following Saint Benedict's principle that work was essential for spiritual well-being. Monks might tend gardens, care for livestock, work in craft workshops, or maintain monastery buildings. This labor not only provided for the community's needs, but also served as a form of spiritual discipline. Meals in the monastery were taken in silence, usually accompanied by readings from spiritual texts. The diet varied with the church calendar, with fasting periods balanced by festivals. While simple, monastic cuisine was often more varied and nutritious than that of the general population, as monasteries had access to diverse food sources and sophisticated cooking techniques. The care of the sick occupied a special place in monastic life. Infirmaries provided care not only for ill monks, but often for local people as well. Monasteries maintained herb gardens for medicinal purposes and developed considerable medical knowledge, preserving and advancing healthcare practices throughout the medieval period. Education was another vital function. Monasteries operated schools for oblates, children dedicated to monastic life, and sometimes for local youth as well. The teaching of Latin, religious texts, and basic academic subjects helped maintain literacy and learning through the Dark Ages. The daily life of medieval monks and nuns demonstrates remarkable organization and purpose. While their primary goal was spiritual, their activities had far-reaching effects on medieval society, economy, and culture. Their routine created centers of stability and learning that helped preserve civilization through turbulent times. What has surprised you most about monastic life so far? Perhaps it's the sophisticated organization, the economic influence, or the balance between prayer and practical work. Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you're fascinated by these insights into medieval monastic life, remember to like this video and subscribe to Medieval Chronicles. Stay tuned as we continue exploring the remarkable world of medieval monasticism. The establishment of the Benedictine Rule in the 6th century marked a pivotal moment in monastic history. When Saint Benedict wrote his famous rule around 530 AD, he created more than just a set of guidelines. He established a comprehensive framework that would shape Western monasticism for centuries to come. The rule's genius lay in its practicality and moderation, providing detailed instructions for daily life while remaining flexible enough to adapt to various circumstances. The rule's implementation spread gradually across Europe, gaining momentum as monasteries recognized its effectiveness in creating stable, well-ordered communities. Its emphasis on the balance between prayer, work, and study created a sustainable model of monastic life. The phrase ora et labora, pray and work, became the cornerstone of Benedictine monasticism, establishing a rhythm that would define monastic life throughout the medieval period. Monastic reforms emerged as crucial turning points, particularly during the 10th and 11th centuries. The Cluniac reforms, beginning in 910 at the Abbey of Cluny in Burgundy, represented a significant shift in monastic practice. Under the leadership of a series of capable abbots, Cluny established a network of monasteries that followed a strictly interpreted version of the Benedictine Rule. This movement emphasized elaborate liturgical ceremonies and established Cluny's independence from secular control. The creation of scriptoriums and libraries stands as one of monasticism's most enduring achievements. These writing rooms became the intellectual powerhouses of medieval Europe, where monks meticulously copied manuscripts, preserving ancient knowledge that might otherwise have been lost. The scriptorium was more than just a copying center. It was a sophisticated operation involving parchment preparation, ink making, illumination, and binding. The resulting libraries became treasuries of knowledge, housing collections that would form the foundation of medieval learning. Missionary activities carried monastic influence far beyond monastery walls. Beginning in the 6th century, monks ventured into the unconverted regions of Europe, establishing monasteries that served as centers for both spiritual and cultural conversion. St. Augustine's mission to England in 597, sent by Pope Gregory the Great, exemplifies how monasticism spread Christianity and Roman cultural traditions throughout Europe. These missionary monks not only brought religious teachings, but also introduced new agricultural techniques, architectural styles, and educational practices. The Viking invasions of the 8th and 9th centuries presented monasteries with unprecedented challenges. These raids, targeting wealthy religious houses, resulted in widespread destruction and the loss of countless manuscripts and artifacts. However, this period of crisis led to important adaptations. Monasteries developed better defenses, relocated to more secure locations, and created networks for protecting their most valuable manuscripts and relics. Some communities established small cells or prayer houses in remote locations, ensuring the continuation of monastic life even in dangerous times. The societal disruptions of the early Middle Ages highlighted monasteries' role as stabilizing forces. During periods of political fragmentation and social upheaval, monasteries maintained cultural continuity and provided essential services. They served as hospitals during plagues, offered sanctuary during conflicts, and maintained educational systems when secular institutions faltered. Their economic activities, including advanced agricultural methods and craft production, helped sustain local communities through difficult times. The economic innovations developed by monasteries proved particularly significant. They introduced new farming techniques, managed extensive agricultural estates, and developed specialized industries such as brewing and cheesemaking. Monastery mills, breweries, and workshops became important centers of economic activity, helping to maintain trade networks during periods of political instability. In response to changing times, new monastic orders emerged, each with its distinct interpretation of religious life. The Cistercian order, founded in 1098, sought to return to a stricter observation of the Benedictine Rule, emphasizing manual labor and simplicity. The Carthusians, established in 1084, created a unique form of monasticism combining hermetic solitude with community life. These developments demonstrated monasticism's ability to adapt while maintaining its essential spiritual focus. Perhaps most remarkably, monasteries served as bridges between the ancient and medieval worlds, preserving not only religious texts but also classical literature, scientific works, and philosophical treatises. Their role in education and scholarship laid the groundwork for the emergence of medieval universities and the eventual flowering of the Renaissance. This preservation and transmission of knowledge remains one of monasticism's most significant contributions to Western civilization. The cultural and intellectual contributions of medieval monasteries represent one of the most profound influences on Western civilization. Through their dedication to learning, preservation, and innovation, monasteries became the primary custodians of knowledge during the Middle Ages. Manuscript preservation stands as perhaps the most crucial intellectual contribution of medieval monasteries. In their scriptoria, monks undertook the painstaking work of copying texts, developing sophisticated systems for document preservation and reproduction. This wasn't simply a matter of mechanical copying. It required deep knowledge of Latin, Greek, and sometimes Hebrew, along with expertise in materials preparation and artistic skills for illumination. The process of manuscript creation was remarkably complex. Monks prepared parchment from animal skins, created inks from various natural materials, and developed detailed systems of page layout and text organization. They introduced innovations such as punctuation marks, chapter divisions, and indexes that we still use today. The illuminated manuscripts they produced weren't merely functional texts but works of art, featuring intricate decorations, detailed illustrations, and brilliant colors derived from precious materials. In terms of educational developments, monasteries established the first systematic approaches to learning in medieval Europe. The monastery schools developed the curriculum of the 7 liberal arts: the trivium, grammar, rhetoric, and logic, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music. This educational framework would later form the foundation of medieval universities. The monastic approach to education was comprehensive, beginning with basic literacy and advancing to sophisticated theological and philosophical studies. Monasteries maintained libraries that served as centers of learning, where scholars could access texts from across Europe and the Mediterranean world. They developed teaching methods that combined lecture, discussion, and individual study, creating models that would influence education for centuries to come. Agricultural innovations from monasteries transformed medieval farming practices. Monks developed new techniques for crop rotation, soil improvement, and livestock breeding. They maintained detailed agricultural records, tracking successful methods and documenting failures. Monastic estates often served as experimental farms where new crops and techniques could be tested before being adopted by the broader community. Monasteries pioneered sophisticated irrigation systems, developed new tools for farming, and introduced crops from distant regions. They perfected techniques for winemaking, cheese production, and beer brewing, creating products that remain famous today. Their methodical approach to agriculture helped increase food production and improve nutrition throughout medieval Europe. Medical knowledge and healthcare represented another vital contribution of medieval monasteries. Monastery infirmaries were often the only healthcare facilities available in medieval communities. Monks and nuns studied medical texts from ancient Greece and Rome, as well as Arabic medical treatises, combining this knowledge with practical experience in treating the sick. Monastic gardens grew medicinal herbs, and monasteries developed extensive pharmacological knowledge. They maintained detailed records of treatments and their effects, gradually building a substantial body of medical knowledge. Monastery hospitals provided care not only for their own communities, but also for pilgrims, travelers, and local people, establishing traditions of healthcare that would eventually evolve into modern medical institutions. The musical and artistic contributions of monasteries profoundly influenced Western cultural traditions. Gregorian chant, developed and preserved in monasteries, established the foundations of Western musical notation and harmony. Monks created sophisticated systems for recording music, developing the staff notation that became standard throughout Europe. Monastic art extended far beyond manuscript illumination. Monasteries were centers for the development of architecture, sculpture, metalwork, and painting. They preserved and transmitted artistic techniques from the classical world while developing new styles and approaches. The Romanesque and Gothic architectural styles evolved largely through monastic building projects, establishing principles that would influence architecture for centuries. Monasteries also played a crucial role in developing and preserving techniques for creating stained glass, metalwork, and religious sculptures. Their workshops produced everything from simple devotional objects to complex architectural decorations, maintaining high standards of craftsmanship and artistic innovation. The intellectual life of monasteries encompassed natural science as well. Monks studied astronomy, maintaining careful observations of celestial events. They developed sophisticated methods for calculating dates and times, crucial for both agricultural and liturgical purposes. Their studies of natural phenomena laid groundwork for later scientific developments. Perhaps most significantly, monasteries created environments where intellectual and artistic pursuits could flourish even during periods of political and social upheaval. Their commitment to preservation and study ensured the survival of classical knowledge, while fostering new developments in arts, sciences, and technology. The cultural and intellectual legacy of medieval monasteries extends far beyond their time. Their methods of organizing and preserving knowledge influenced the development of libraries and archives. Their educational approaches helped shape modern academic traditions. Their artistic and musical innovations continue to influence Western culture, while their agricultural and medical discoveries laid foundations for modern practices in these fields. Through their patient work of preservation, innovation, and education, medieval monasteries helped bridge the ancient and modern worlds, ensuring the continuity of knowledge and culture that would make possible the Renaissance and the eventual emergence of modern Western civilization. Medieval monasteries existed not in isolation, but as part of complex networks of relationships that shaped both religious and secular life. Their interactions with various powers and authorities created a fascinating web of influence that extended far beyond monastery walls. The relationship between monasteries and feudal lords was intricate and often delicately balanced. Many monasteries owed their initial foundation to noble patrons who provided land, buildings, and ongoing financial support. These aristocratic benefactors often maintained close ties with their monasteries, expecting spiritual benefits in return for their patronage. Monasteries offered prayers for their patrons' souls, maintained family burial chapels, and sometimes educated noble children. However, these relationships could become sources of tension. While monasteries benefited from noble protection, they also had to guard against excessive secular interference. Some lords attempted to treat monastery lands as personal property or tried to influence the selection of abbots. The struggle to maintain independence while preserving beneficial relationships with powerful nobles required considerable diplomatic skill from monastery leaders. The interaction between monasteries and papal authorities represented another crucial dimension of monastic life. The papacy often granted monasteries special privileges, including exemption from local episcopal control, placing them directly under papal protection. This relationship strengthened both institutions. Monasteries gained autonomy from local interference, while the papacy extended its influence through a network of loyal religious houses. Papal authority played a crucial role in supporting monastic reform movements. When local bishops or nobles resisted attempts to restore stricter observance of monastic rules, reformers could appeal to Rome for support. The papacy frequently intervened to protect monasteries from secular exploitation, though this protection sometimes came with expectations of financial contributions to Rome. Trade and economic networks centered on monasteries grew increasingly sophisticated throughout the medieval period. Monasteries weren't merely spiritual centers, they were also major economic institutions. They managed vast agricultural estates, operated mills and breweries, and engaged in long-distance trade. Monastic products, particularly wine, beer, and cheese, became important trade goods, creating economic connections across Europe. The sophisticated economic management systems developed by monasteries influenced medieval business practices. They maintained detailed accounts, developed credit arrangements, and established regular trade routes. Monastery granaries and storehouses often served as local centers for grain storage and distribution, helping to stabilize food supplies in their regions. Cross-cultural exchanges, through scholarship, represented one of monasticism's most significant contributions to medieval civilization. Monasteries served as crucial points of contact between different cultural traditions. Their libraries collected texts from across the Christian world and beyond, including works from Byzantine, Islamic, and Jewish scholars. The translation movement centered in monastic scriptoria proved particularly important. Monks worked to translate Greek and Arabic texts into Latin, making ancient learning accessible to medieval scholars. This process wasn't merely technical translation. It involved sophisticated intellectual engagement with different cultural traditions, helping to enrich medieval thought. Monastery schools became meeting points for scholars from different regions and traditions. Students traveled considerable distances to study at renowned monastic centers, creating networks of intellectual exchange that crossed political and cultural boundaries. These educational networks helped maintain cultural connections during periods of political fragmentation. The architectural influence of monasteries provides another example of cross-cultural exchange. Monastic builders incorporated elements from various traditions, Roman, Byzantine, and local styles, creating new architectural forms that would influence building practices throughout Europe. The spread of architectural innovations through networks of monastic houses helped establish common artistic traditions across diverse regions. Monasteries also played crucial roles in diplomatic relations. Abbots often served as ambassadors and mediators, their religious status and educational background making them ideal diplomatic representatives. Monastery guest houses provided neutral meeting places for political negotiations, while monastic networks facilitated communication between different regions. The integration of local traditions with Christian practice represented another important aspect of monastic influence. As monasteries spread into new regions, they often adapted local customs and artistic styles into their religious practices. This cultural synthesis helped make Christianity more accessible to local populations while preserving elements of indigenous traditions. Medical knowledge provides a particularly interesting example of cross-cultural exchange through monasteries. Monastic medical practices combined classical Greco-Roman traditions with Arabic medical knowledge and local healing practices. Monastery infirmaries became places where different medical traditions could meet and merge, creating more effective approaches to healthcare. The economic activities of monasteries fostered technological exchange as well. Monastic workshops adapted and improved techniques from various sources, from agricultural methods to metallurgy and textile production. These innovations spread through networks of monastery dependencies and trading relationships, helping to disseminate technological improvements across Europe. Perhaps most significantly, monasteries helped maintain international connections during periods of political fragmentation. Their networks of communication and exchange helped preserve a sense of common culture and purpose across medieval Europe, transcending local political boundaries and contributing to the development of shared intellectual and cultural traditions that would shape European civilization for centuries to come. Through these various forms of interaction and exchange, medieval monasteries served as crucial bridges between cultures, between secular and religious spheres, and between different regions of medieval Europe. Their role in facilitating these connections helped create the foundations for the cultural and intellectual developments that would eventually lead to the Renaissance and the modern era. The legacy of medieval monasticism extends far beyond its immediate historical context, profoundly influencing European civilization in ways that continue to resonate today. This enduring impact can be explored across several key dimensions, highlighting how the monastic tradition shaped the development of various aspects of modern society. Monasteries played a foundational role in shaping Europe's educational infrastructure. They established the early patterns of organized learning, which later evolved into universities. Their architectural innovations, particularly in Romanesque and Gothic styles, created architectural principles that influenced Western building designs for centuries. The monastic tradition of systematic record-keeping and documentation helped shape modern archival practices, laying the groundwork for administrative systems we rely on today. Additionally, the agricultural innovations pioneered by monks, such as crop rotation and advanced irrigation techniques, revolutionized European farming and contributed significantly to the agricultural revolution. Monasteries also created early models for organized healthcare, serving as the blueprint for the development of modern hospitals. The preservation of classical knowledge by monks is another critical aspect of their legacy. During the turbulent medieval period, monks systematically copied and preserved classical texts that might otherwise have been lost. Their tradition of textual commentary and analysis helped develop scholarly methods still used in modern academic disciplines. Monks also translated key Greek and Arabic texts into Latin, making ancient knowledge accessible to medieval scholars and laying the foundation for the Renaissance. Furthermore, monasteries developed sophisticated cataloging systems that influenced modern library science. The role of monasteries in preserving classical medical knowledge bridged the gap between ancient and modern medicine, ensuring the continuity of critical medical texts that continue to inform healthcare practices. Monasticism also laid the foundations for modern education and scholarship. The emphasis monasteries placed on structured learning and systematic study became a model for modern educational practices. Their development of scriptoria and libraries established standards for academic research, documentation, and knowledge sharing. The practice of scholarly debate and philosophical inquiry within the monastery walls helped cultivate the intellectual climate that would later define modern academic discourse. Monastic schools created curricula that would influence education for centuries, and their focus on literacy and textual analysis laid the groundwork for modern literary studies. The spiritual and cultural influences of monasticism continue to be felt today. The monastic ideal of a contemplative life still resonates in modern spiritual practices, especially in various religious traditions that emphasize quiet reflection and meditation. The musical traditions developed by monks, most notably Gregorian chant, significantly shaped the development of Western music, influencing compositions and musical structures for centuries. The work ethic fostered in monasteries also had a lasting impact on Western business and professional culture, where values such as discipline, diligence, and organization continue to be held in high regard. Monasteries also pioneered charitable service, establishing models for modern social welfare systems that seek to address the needs of the less fortunate. The balance monks struck between individual contemplation and communal living continues to influence modern organizational structures, especially in cooperative and communal living arrangements. The lasting institutional impact of monasticism is evident in many modern institutions. Numerous contemporary universities trace their origins to the educational foundations set by monastic schools. Healthcare institutions, too, often reflect monastic organizational principles, particularly in their dedication to service and care. Modern library systems are directly descended from the cataloging and preservation practices established by monks. Additionally, agricultural and viticultural practices developed by monasteries are still in use today, with many of the methods perfected by monks continuing to influence farming and wine production. The monastic tradition of craft brewing has also carried over into the modern artisanal brewing movement, where traditional techniques are being rediscovered and celebrated. Monastic principles continue to be relevant in modern society, particularly in the areas of work-life balance, sustainability, and community organization. The monastic approach to balancing work, prayer, and reflection resonates with contemporary discussions about mindfulness, mental health, and well-being. Their sustainable living practices, such as self-sufficiency and environmental stewardship, offer valuable insights for modern environmental concerns, advocating for a more conscious relationship with nature. The The monastic approach to community organization and governance has influenced intentional communities today, offering models for cooperative living and decision-making. Finally, the monastic tradition of lifelong learning aligns closely with modern educational philosophies, which emphasize continuous personal and intellectual development throughout one's life. The monastic legacy is therefore both profound and enduring, with its influence stretching across educational systems, healthcare, architecture, agriculture, and cultural practices. From the preservation of classical knowledge to the development of modern organizational structures, the contributions of medieval monks continue to shape contemporary society in countless ways. The enduring legacy of medieval monasticism demonstrates how thoroughly these institutions shaped European civilization. Their influence extends from practical innovations in agriculture and architecture to profound contributions in education, healthcare, and spiritual practice. Modern institutions and practices continue to reflect monastic origins, often in unexpected ways. This rich heritage invites us to consider how historical institutions can shape civilization across centuries. The monastic legacy reminds us that organized communities dedicated to higher purposes can produce lasting positive change that extends far beyond their original context. Share your thoughts on how monasteries shaped medieval society. What aspects of monastic influence do you find most surprising or relevant to our modern world? Consider how these ancient institutions continue to influence our contemporary approaches to education, community organization, and spiritual practice.